Big thanks go out to Tywa for supporting today's video via Patreon. Atraxa Praetor's Voice versus Ixhel, Venser Corpse Puppet, and Itali Primal Storm. No ramp there, but we do have some turn 3 card draw, which we can go a bit slower in multiplayer, so I'll try that. Alright, and that's handy. We draw into a tap land. It's not blue mana, unfortunately, but get that Tricycle land out of the way. Saw a Gitaxian Probe from the Venser. I'll have a look at who's handy viewed in a minute. We draw into Contagion Engine, so still nothing to do on turn 2. We'll just throw out a Scrub land. And according to the chat, it's us that he looked at with the Gitaxian Probe, so he does know what's in our hand apart from the Contagion Engine. First commander of the game is the Venser Corpse Puppet coming down on turn 2. I'll take this time to point out as well that this Atraxa deck, it is a Phyrexia themed deck, so all the cards in the deck are of the Phyrexian variety, as we'll hopefully see during this game. Draw into another land in the Flooded Strand, so if we go down 2 cards here, we'll have 6 cards in hand, and then we'll go up with the Painful Truths, so probably not gonna do that here. So we'll just pass the turn with all that mana held up. It's a shame to not do anything on our first 3 turns, but it's not like our opponents are going particularly fast either. Even the Itali is going slow. Well, speaking of which, it's about time. Itali saw some fast mana. Itali always seems to have it. And there is a Mental Misstep, so we're up against a spikier player in the Venser player apparently. And there is a Scoop from the Itali player. There's one more person who needs to eat a ban. Dimir Signet for the Dimir player, and attacking in at us for 1 point of commander damage. Phyrexian Crusader from Ixhel, so that's more stuff that we can proliferate with, at least. We do have a toxic counter here. Obviously we're not going to proliferate onto ourselves, but yeah, the proliferate definitely going to be relevant in this Phyrexian all-is-one meta. There's an Arcane Signet for us, so yeah, it's a shame we didn't get that last turn. I'm thinking of a Ajani Sleeper Agent at this point, although now that our opponents have creatures in play, maybe it's not the best idea. We'll use the Flooded Strand to get into our blue mana, and then I think we can concentrate on ramping a little bit with the Arcane Signet, and might as well go for the Distorted Curiosity now that we won't have to discard. So that is simply 3 mana, draw 2 cards. Gets into more ramping Nature's Law, and more card drawing, Feed the Infection. Venser goes straight through the combat phase this time, is just simply going to rely on Proliferate, I think. And there is an Inexorable Tide, one that we want to see the back of pretty damn quickly. I haven't included this in any of my decks. They've always been cut at the last second because it is just a do-nothing card whilst you play it and just have it sit there for a turn cycle, but if it can survive, it'll do a hell of a lot of work, I imagine. The Phyrexian Crusader was going to go in at Venser, and yes it is, they pulled back for a second there. Venser going in the way, it will survive, but its Toxic 1 will be useless whilst it's at -1 power. So we could play out Atraxa here and proliferate onto the Venser. We drew into another Walker in Vraska, Betrayal's Sting. We definitely want to play our land. We'll get down the Nature's Law, and I think that can be a tap land here, and we'll just play the Atraxa, I think. And this is just a means of us actually doing something this turn and having our commander in play. It's good against blockers as well. Oh, let us proliferate before you remove it, please. That's ridiculous. They could have waited for us to proliferate and get rid of this, and then destroyed the Atraxa. There's really no need to rush there. Fair enough if you want to remove our commander, but at least let us get rid of this one as well. I don't see that it gives our opponent any benefit to have the Venser in play still. Well, there's a Demonic Tutor. Our opponent's playing into the Venser's hand here, so gets the first proliferate. We are the only ones who are going to not benefit from that. We are on 2 poison. Making the Hollow Sentinel, which our opponent wouldn't have if the Ixhel had let us get rid of the Venser. Now we see Throne of Geth as well, putting us on 3 Infect. Flying on Lifelink going on to the Hollow Sentinel, but it doesn't have haste, so not going to be all that useful. Commander Sphere from the 3-colour player. And down comes Ixhel, Scion of Atraxa, so a counterspell is going to be revealed from the Venser by the looks of it. First proliferating by sacrificing the token with the Throne of Geth. Takes us up to 4, and because they proliferate, it instantly is replaced. So a hell of a lot of work being done there, all thanks to the Venser not being dealt with. And then we see a delay on the commander. So we go up to 5 Infect. And now the Phyrexian Crusader swings in towards Venser. He'll have no problem in blocking with this. Doesn't care if it dies or not, I imagine. Alright, and there's an island for us. So we could get down the Atraxa here. Or maybe just get down our commander again. Don't have any means of removal for this thing, unfortunately. It is doing a lot of work, dodging the green players. Throw down the island we just drew into. I suppose it's a good idea to get down the Vraska now, whilst our opponents are tapped out and there's only going to be one creature left in play after we proliferate. I'm actually going to take 2 life to it as well, so that it will come down with less loyalty, but we'll have more mana held up afterwards. So we can go for the 0, proliferate onto our commander and these 2 creatures here. Obviously not going to add a poison counter to ourselves. So Venser did get another turn there, unfortunately. We've got enough mana for the Painful Truths now, so I'll put the different colours into that and we can lose 3 and draw 3. Drew into a Dismember, by the way. Alright, so we're at 8 cards in hand. There's a Toxic Deluge, which might come in handy. Just need to try and get rid of this Inexorable Tide. That's what I was hoping for, drawing into there. So I think getting rid of the Dismember is fine if we've got a Toxic Deluge in hand. Venser straight back into play for our opponent with 3 mana held up and 2 cards in hand. So the only benefit of this deck so far for us is that it hasn't had too many cards available. We can get rid of this thing, we should be able to grind him to a halt pretty much. The Phyrexian Crusader continuing to swing in over at Venser. I have no doubt that that thing will be blocking here, or maybe not. No, just decided to take the damage with a proliferating Planeswalker in play. And now a Atraxa Phyrexia. Target player draws 3 and loses 3 and gets 3 poison counters. Okay, so giving the Dimir player card draw in exchange for getting more poison counters. And the Dimir player did tap down some blue mana there, so I'm not sure if that was a bluff or if he did have counter magic held up. Only had 2 cards in hand, but the way this deck is running so far, I won't be surprised if it was rammed full of counters. Okay, so let's see here. Don't think any of our opponents are going to be struggling on black mana, so it's fine to get down the Urborg if we want to. We don't have Cabal Coffers in this deck, so it doesn't particularly matter. We definitely want down the Astral Cornucopia because it's 3 mana to get down, but after we proliferate it will tap for 2, so effectively only costs us 1 mana. The Dimir player continuing to hold up priority. Drop the Urborg, and we can go for the Ajani and maybe try the Toxic Deluge here, because I imagine they're going to counter the Ajani. Good thing about Infect is that you tend to have a surplus of life because it's not your life total that your opponents are going after. The Ajani is allowed into play, so we'll go for the plus on Ajani now. We could put Sol Ring on the bottom of our library. I think we're fine to do that here. Can't put a Sol Ring in our hand with the Ajani. So we will plus on the Vraska. Vraska puts the Venser on 6 poison, 6 loyalty here. This now taps for 2. Ajani's on 6 as well, ready for the emblem next turn, which I doubt it's going to get. And then we'll attempt to Toxic Deluge, which I'd be very surprised if this went through, but we'll attempt it anyway. And there's a definite counter spell coming here, I think. No, it is a Vamp Tutor. So that Venser not going down previously has really hurt us here because we'd have an extra turn around the table potentially. It could be that the Vamp Tutor goes in for Necropotence or some means of card draw to cast more spells, and this thing just gets better and better the longer it's left in play. Anyway, going to put us at 8 poison counters because the Throne of Geth sacrifices the token, and proliferating just makes another one straight away. Then it is a costly plunder, drawing a couple of cards, sacrificing the token, and of course thanks to Inexorable Tide whenever they proliferate, making another token once again. But everything does get wiped out, so apparently our opponent didn't have counter magic or just didn't fancy using it. But all they have to do is cast 1 spell here, which can just be the commander, and that's us done. So I'm not sure if we would have done anything ultimately. It is a mere retriever from our opponent. Yeah, we would have potentially had another turn if the Atraxa hadn't gone down and the Venser had gone down like it should have done. But we'll see what else our opponent can do here, because sat at 6 poison counters over here, you have to assume that there's proliferate in the junk deck over here, which we haven't seen a lot from, in all fairness. There's a prosthetic injector, so that can get toxic going. Summoning sickness on the creatures at the moment. Equipping this up, making it a 1/3 toxic. Excel being cast again. And this does have Toxic too, so we'll put our opponent on 8 poison counters at least next turn. And Ixhel just leaving it at that. Venser being recast here, I imagine. Nope, it is Corrupted Conscience, so here's where you can start to look at getting the poison counters onto your opponent. They'll get at least 1 here, thanks to Toxic 1 on the Mere Retriever. Okay, and then the Ixhel player just decides to scoop at that. Awesome. So I want to show you this one just because the Venser deck seemed cool, but not exactly a satisfying game, so I'm going to try another one with this deck. Atraxa versus the same Ixhel player, Kineos and Tiro, and Marrow Nora. We've got most of our colours again with some fast mana. I like the Venerated Rock Priest, so yeah, we'll keep that. Going to empty our hand pretty quickly is the only downside of this one, but when you mulligan on Magic Online you tend to be rewarded with a 0 land hand, so I think we're fine to just try this one. Can start going for the Toxic on turn 1 with the Venerated Rock Priest. Okay, more Infect in an Inkmoth Nexus, so we'll go for an untapped green source. We've got more black than white in the deck, so I'll go for, what will that make it, a Bayou here. Hopefully our opponents don't scoop here, because as fast a start as it is, we are pretty much empty-handed, because we've just got a bunch of lands in hand at this point. So we'll go in at the Ixhel player, who didn't get any Infect in the last game. Turn 1 Skull Clamp for the Marrow Nora, and a mere Convert from the Ixhel, so I'm glad I swung in over there first. Now, who's most likely to get a blocker in the way is the question. We can get Infect through with the Inkmoth Nexus. I don't know about playing the Inkmoth Nexus to get Summoning Sickness away from it though, because especially now we've got our 4th piece of coloured mana, I would like to slam down an Atraxa on turn 4 if I can. Let's go through to combat first. I think we might see a rat from the Marrow Nora, so we'll go in that way. And it might be that we can get into some ramp to make another land ready for Atraxa on turn 4 still, but yeah, and if that's the case we can go for the Inkmoth being played next turn, get a tap land out of the way here. Yep, and there is a rat colony. Players tend to choose rat colony now over Relentless Rats because obviously this is much faster to get out. We're just hoping Kineos doesn't get a blocker into play at this point. Yep, instead it is a Nature's Law. But still has a blocker in Birds of Paradise. We can encourage our opponent to block with it though, and make less mana. Could always go wide with the Inkmoth if we decide to as well. Noteworthy that Ixhel has a Karn's Bastion in play. And there is a turn 3 Ixhel Scion of Atraxa. No card advantage from the Ixhel just yet. Alright, and there's a Tezzeret's Gambit for us, which would be nice to play this turn, so go through to combat again. See if we can encourage our opponent to block with the birds. They either take a Toxic damage to this thing and lose the birds, or they take a Toxic to that, so this assumes that this player swings in over at Kineos, which probably should, but might come in at us. Anyway, we do have our opponent blocked with the Birds of Paradise, so we'll just go for this for 3 mana and 2 life, because I want to get down a tap land with the fetch most likely this turn. So we can proliferate onto each of our opponents, putting them at 2. And then we just draw a couple of cards into another island, and an Arcane Signet is tempting, so yeah, we'll go for the blue mana into Arcane Signet instead. Probably should have played the Inkmoth there actually, because yeah, that would have removed the Summoning Sickness from it, and we still have the 4 colours available for next turn. So yeah, slight error in my play there. Maybe we'll lose the Arcane Signet over the next turn cycle though. Sol Ring from the rat player. So no one's doing terribly here really. And the rat colony swinging in at us. 4 cards in Marrow Nora's hand, but deciding to get rid of the rat colony to send him up to 6. The second commander of the game into play, Kineos and Tiro of Meletis. And here's where it becomes relevant that we didn't get the Inkmoth into play last turn, but we can play it here. So don't have to worry about Summoning Sickness next turn. So that actually works out very nicely for us, even after I made my mistake previously. So even if the Ixhel swings in towards us here, we can send Inkmoth in at the Kineos and Tiro. And yeah, it does come in at us. So we take 2 Infect damage here. Okay, expand the sphere. Could proliferate twice, but likely goes for the ramp here, I imagine. Gets out a Triome, and then deciding to proliferate. So each of us on 3 poison, and we still need to deal some Infect damage over here, which we'll likely do next turn. Ixhel is starting to take card advantage here, so a card exiled from the top of our library, and 1 here as well. Okay, so there's a try-on for us. I think we're looking at getting down Atraxa here and trying to gain some life. So animating the Inkmoth Nexus, getting Atraxa into play. We don't need haste on the Inkmoth Nexus anymore thanks to the Kineos and Tyro. So go through to combat here. This can go into the right against our flying commander over there. The Rot Priest goes into the left whilst that player's wide open. And we get the, hopefully, first infect damage on our opponent. Okay, and that lands nicely. So I think we'll leave the Lightning Greaves on the Atraxa. We want to get down the Triome. Nearly forgot to make a land for the turn. That would have been bad. And yeah, pass the turn at that. Proliferate with the Atraxa. And that is a 5th poison counter here, a 2nd one, and a 3rd one for our opponent. We can, if we keep drawing into lands, we can maybe look at Gavany Township next turn, start buffing our army. Can even put plus counters on the Inkmoth. Arcane Signet from the Rat player, followed by a Necropotence with 5 cards in hand. So must be eager to get into some answers. Like I said in the last game, our opponent's in dire straits here at 5 infect damage, but does have a surplus amount of life, as you tend to have against infect. So shoving a lot of life into that Necropotence. Our opponent taking himself down to 25. And the mono black player ending the turn with 18 cards in hand, so not sure if he's trying to set up a Living Death reanimation, something like that. Might have just been fishing for a tutor or a board wipe or something. Okay, and we've got a player here that has decided to scoop on us. Doesn't like the infect apparently. Didn't even draw a card through the draw step. Anyway, discarded from the Rat player. We see Piper of the Swarm, Balthor the Defiled, a bunch of rat colonies, Ogre Slumlord, Magerite Stone, a Patriarch's Bidding, so getting rid of the mass reanimation stuff, a Chittering Witch and some lands as well. A Ghostly Prism from the Ixhel, and there is a Plague Stinger, so we'll have to be careful of that with the Atraxa, but can be negated by the Gavany Township at least. Ixhel getting some more card advantage at the end of the turn. Hasn't made use of any of it yet, I don't think. Did play a Swamp from the mono black player previously, so just 1 card in exile here, and we've got a couple as well. Alright, and there is a Skithiryx, the Blight Dragon, so we could knock out the mono black player here. Yeah, I wonder if that's the thing to do here. Not going to be swinging in with the Inkmoth Nexus, so we can tap that down. And yeah, let's really annoy our opponent here. Put haste onto the Skithiryx. See if the mono black player got into any removal. He should look at where we swing in first. I suppose I should have got down, yeah, should have got down another black mana with the Wooded Foothills so that we can reanimate or regenerate this thing. But I'm not expecting to get full games out with Infect decks anyway. So we'll send Atraxa into the right against the Infector. They can block with that if they want to. And then the other two will attempt to get rid of the Rat player. And I'll just pay into the Ghostly Prison. I was thinking of holding up mana for the Ghostly Prison, of course, that's why I didn't think of getting down double black for the regenerate, but could always have not swung in over here. I do like the idea of getting rid of the Plague Stinger though. And it looks like we're going to be dealing damage to the black player. So yeah, taking them down to 10 infect, our opponent graciously takes it. And I think we can make the Wooded Foothills another tap land. Proliferate onto our opponent. And there's no point proliferating a minus counter onto the Atraxa. We're going to be looking at Gavany Township next turn. We can still block the Ixhel quite nicely thanks to it only having 2 power. Alright, not holding up the Khan's Bastion during combat, instead just going straight up for a Fumigate. So yeah, that's fine. All of our stuff getting blown up here. Luckily we've got the Lightning Helix still. Our opponent has plummeted down to 4 mana there though after getting rid of a Mana Dorks. The reason that I don't like playing Mana Dorks, they're way too fragile for my liking. Alright, and another land for us. We're doing pretty well considering we've drawn a hell of a lot of lands this game. So we'll definitely get down our commander again. And then we can animate the Inkmoth Nexus. Is there any point in doing that? Yeah, because we can just not swing in with the Atraxa. So Inkmoth Nexus, not with any plus counters on it yet unfortunately, but we can just put the Lightning Greaves onto the Atraxa, and this way we get 2 poison counters on our opponent thanks to Atraxa's Proliferate. So swing in with the Inkmoth, pay into the tax, and then that's 5 infect at combat. Atraxa going to put the 6th infect counter onto our opponent. So that board wipe is buying our opponent a turn here, because could have been that we put a plus counter onto the Inkmoth Nexus last turn, and then that would have been a couple of Infect, would have had them on 7. Then obviously proliferating at the end of the turn would have made this a 3-3 Infector. Okay, but our opponent getting down an Atraxa of his own. We do outrace their Atraxa at this point, but they managed to put us on 4 Infect. We go down to 28 thanks to the Mana Crypt, and it's another land for us. Yeah, I'm pleased with how this game is going, considering how flooded we've been. Animate the Inkmoth again. Then we can play Gavony Township. That is 4 mana and a tap. And then I don't mind offering up the trade, their Atraxa versus ours. The plus counter doesn't really help there, but yeah, I don't want them holding up their Atraxa against our Inkmoth the whole time. But otherwise, we're just proliferating on the Inkmoth Nexus for the rest of the game, as well as our opponent. They've only got 4 proliferates left that they can survive. Just deciding to take the commander damage, so yeah, if they're going to keep taking Atraxa commander damage, that's going to become relevant as well. They're at 9 at the moment, so it is a race against time for our opponent, putting them at 7 Infect, and like I said before, this jumps up to a 3-3 and a 6-6 Atraxa. You can see why I wanted to get the Gavony Township going before. Nature's Law gets our opponent into the 3rd land. Unfortunately, I think our opponent's been far too slow here. Then a Blight Belly Rat after that. That is a 2-2 with Toxic 1. And it proliferates when it dies. Our opponent could have swung in there and tried to gain some life, but I think they know that we want rid of this thing. So they send us up to 5 Infect. Okay, and there's a Swiftfoot Boots, which is of little to no use to us really. Question is, do we animate Inkmoth Nexus up to a 4-4 with the Gavony Township and then offer the trade for the Atraxa? I think that's probably alright at this point, because we can just continue to play out Atraxa, I think. So activate Gavony Township, the Inkmoth Nexus becomes a 4-4, Atraxa's a 7-7, so we'll put them on 16 points of commander here, and they won't have a flyer in the air if they block with Atraxa, but, well, they do have to block the Inkmoth Nexus here, so they are between a rock and a hard place. So yeah, blocking the Inkmoth Nexus was always going to get rid of that, unless we could destroy the Atraxa, because it does have Death Touch on it, so it's either commander damage or Infect we're going to get our opponent on. Like I said, we get them to 16, they're going to be on 8 Infect counters, which gives them a couple more turns at the most, assuming that they can't get rid of the Atraxa again. Oh, and I didn't notice that the Phyrexian Metamorph was ours. They must have played it off the top with the Exhale. Okay, there's a Canker Bloom, can destroy the Lightning Greaves if they want to, and they might have removal in hand. They really need to get rid of our commander here. They do decide to blow up the Lightning Greaves, but yeah, don't have anything else. Let's see what we were drawing into. It was a Corrupted Conscience, so we could have stolen away their commander there had they decided to get that down, because that obviously could have blocked their Atraxa. Not sure if they could have afforded it actually, because they were stuck on lands. A noteworthy inclusion that hasn't been coming up in all these All-is-One decks I've been making is Cauldron Haze with the Venerated Rot Priest. It's not the best in this deck, it's better in what is that other commander called? Vishgraz. I'll put Vishgraz up on the screen. Vishgraz is a means of getting a bunch of tokens with Toxic into play, and if you've got the Venerated Rot Priest out in that deck, it does include tokens, and all you have to do is target the creatures with a spell. And the way that Cauldron Haze works is it puts Persist on all of your creatures, which means that each creature is being individually targeted, so if you do have a bunch of tokens in play, you can target them all with Cauldron Haze, and that will trigger the Venerated Rot Priest a bunch of times, as I understand it anyway. Not necessarily a means of ultimately winning the game, but it can get a lot of poison counters thrown around the table. So I just wanted to point that out, because I'm not sure that I'm ever going to be able to show it on the channel, because these Infect games tend to be very fast from early scoops, and well, they are just faster games as it happens. Understandable, people not wanting to play against Infect, so I will leave it there, and hopefully you all enjoyed this Atraxa Phyrexian themed deck. Have a look at it via the link in the description below if you're at all interested, and I will see you all in the next one. I'm tribalkai. Thank you for watching.